and greetings. My name is Lenon Honor. I greet you with lots of love, peace, and positivity. Another question and answer session, and this one is dealing with a question dealing with what people will call spirituality. Okay, and I want to thank the person who asked the question. And if you have any questions for me, you can post them below, and I'll do my best to answer. I'll post and reply, or I'll do a video to answer. It depends on the question. And I want to remind people, make sure you subscribe to my YouTube channel. All right. My name is Lenon Honor. My website is LenonHonor.com. I also have another website, LenonHonorFilms.com. We have radio shows on LenonHonor.com 3 days a week. Well, we have 2 radio shows and then a live video stream on Sundays. But we have a calendar there on LenonHonor.com. I also have an email list on LenonHonor.com. I want to encourage you to sign up too, because we have some wonderful work going on there. And of course, you're on my YouTube account. So I want to thank everybody for tuning on into this video. Here's a question, and this is something I want to answer because I've been dealing a lot with spirituality and what people call spirituality. And I've been sharing certain thoughts and ideas and perspectives that come out of my book. And my book is Deep in the Garden of Consciousness. And this is my copy. That's why it looks kind of rugged. But you can find this on LenonHonor.com. It gets into metaphysics, spirituality. It gets into the true force that created this biological entity. It wasn't a God being out in space. It was something else much more closer to home. I'll talk about that inside the book. Also, talk about the reason as to why the species was created here on Earth and its spiritual responsibility here on planet Earth inside of that book, amongst a whole lot of other things, bio-spiritual interfacing, the spiritual contract between your spiritual component and your physical component, meaning your soul being and your biological being, etc. I talk about autonomic functioning of the human being, how the human being in essence is nothing more than an animal, but we provided with spiritual illumination through the transmittance of spiritual consciousness from the ethereal unto the spiritual. These are the types of things I talk about inside of that book. I'll put a link below, okay, where you can find the book. I have it in paperback, I also have it in PDF form. So this gets to one of the questions that was raised, and it comes out of some of the videos that I have put up dealing with this particular issue. And the question is, how does one get in touch with their spiritual self? And is there such a thing as spiritual guides? This is so fascinating. I know I've said this so many times before, but I want to say it here, and that is that the greatest challenge facing this human species is one of identity. That's the greatest challenge facing this species. It's one of identity. What I mean by this, and I've talked about this in other videos, is that we are not just a biological being, that we are also a spiritual being, and that the spiritual being and biological being, they are married. They are part of a whole, and that when you understand how you are both biological and you are spiritual, physical and spiritual, you realize that it is not something outside of you, meaning spirituality is not outside of you as a biological being, and that as a spiritual being, your physical existence is not outside of you. They actually work in tandem. And I get into this inside of my book, Deep in the Garden of Consciousness. So the reason why I'm saying that it's an issue of identity is because if you really think about it, if you see the full breadth of yourself as not just being biological but also spiritual, then you embrace the fact that you are spiritual, then why would you need to get in touch with your spiritual self? It's an issue of identity. If you know that you are spiritual, why do you need to get in touch with yourself? Unless you don't know that you are spiritual. Now you feel, as a biological being exclusively, that you got to get in touch with your spiritual self, even though your spiritual self is the other half of who you are and what you are. Really, it's what you are. Who you are is the biological component. What you are is a spiritual component. And I talk about that inside the book too. That's one of the primary questions that we must ask. Who am I? What am I? And is there a difference between the two? One of the first things I say inside of the book let's see if I can find it. Oh no, wait a minute, that's not it. Y'all give me a second, because I wanted to read it. I may not be able to find it. I actually haven't looked in this book in quite some time. Oh, here it is. Over time, the memories of what I am have come back to me. In sharing my memories with you, I manifest the power of this reality so that you may discover your own power, and so that you may someday become the butterfly that you always hoped to be. And that butterfly is analogous to your spiritual self. That caterpillar which is subject to the earth and gravity, that is your physical component. But they're really part of the same, you see. So who you are on earth is that caterpillar, it's physical. But what you are is that butterfly that has a capacity to ascend into the heavens. In other words, it's not subject to this earthly domain in this sense, that it's not subject to simply operating on the earth. It can fly higher above. It ascends. That's the analogy. I get more into that inside the book. So the question, if y'all real quickly here, if I read that back to you one more time, I say, over time, the memories of what I am have come back to me. See, the question is, what am I? You know, who am I? What am I? And is there a difference between the two? And yes, there is a difference between the two. They're connected, but there is a difference between the two. Who you are is transitory. It will change over time as a biological entity. But what you are remains the same. It is timeless. And what you are is not subject to time. It is ethereal. But who you are is subject to time, and it is earthbound. That's the biological component. That's your physical component. So part of what I'm getting at is that if, as a human being, you identify as being exclusively the biological component, then you will always perceive spirituality to be outside of you. And therefore, you will think that somehow you need to get in touch with something that is outside of you. But what if you restructured your relationship to the cosmos? This is something that I've been teaching. I'm teaching inside my book that this really comes down to this identity crisis that we have as a species on planet Earth. It comes down to the restructuring of our relationship to the cosmos and recognizing that we are not just biological, that we are also spiritual, and that if we can restructure our relational model and see ourselves as a spiritual being in the first place, then therefore there is no need to seek spirituality, because we are spirituality in the first place. See, this is a much more empowered position, because now as a spiritual being, you realize your relationship to your biological being. It's not about your biological being trying to connect and get in touch with or find its spiritual self. It's about your spiritual self functioning as it should by providing spiritual enlightenment to your biological component. It totally shifts the orientation that we tend to have as a species, and it empowers us, because now we don't have to seek spirituality. We recognize that we are spirituality in the first place, and now we have the power as spiritual beings to begin to spiritualize our physical experience. You see the difference here? As opposed to a physical being that is seeking to find spirituality and is always seeking, always lost, looking here and there, looking here. They got to find a prayer, they find a mantra, they do a meditation, they do a yoga position, they go to the guru, they go to church, they do this, they do that, they practice these rituals, etc. Always doing these externalized things because they don't know themselves holistically. They know their biological self exclusively, so they seek spirituality in external things. It's always external. But when you restructure your relationship to the cosmos and you see yourself as being the spiritual being in the first place, you don't need to seek it anymore. You don't seek spirituality, you know you are it. And now, guess what? Now you bestow upon your biological self spirituality. That's a much more empowered place to be. See, the greatest crisis, I shouldn't say crisis, the greatest challenge facing this human species is one of identity. So how does one get in touch with their spiritual self? And therefore the answer is quite simple. See, what I think some folk expect me to give you some things that you need to do. And no, I'm not going to give you some things that you need to do. No. Because there is nothing that you can do physically that is going to make you more spiritual. Why? Because you are already spiritual. Okay? It's a matter of identity. It's a matter of knowing the full breadth of yourself, not just the biological component, which most of us, we identify exclusively as being a biological entity. It's about knowing the full breadth of yourself. Okay? There's nothing that you can do in this physical domain that's going to make you more spiritual. What you can do as a spiritual being is begin to assist your biological component to reach beyond its autonomic functioning so that it will stop behaving like an animal, and provide it with spiritual illumination so that it can get on track to cosmic respectability. I'll talk about that inside the book as well. That's the true orientation in terms of uplifting the species, what people really call ascension. We got it so twisted. We think that it has to do with some spiritual event or a date. No. It has to do with getting the species back on track to cosmic respectability. And over time, in other words, eons, continue to progress as a species collectively. That's where we continue to ascend the species. And after many, many eons, we will come back into the realm of cosmic respectability. But in the first place, we have to restructure our relational model to the cosmos. We have to recognize our full identity, which is not just biological, it's spiritual. So it's only when we see spirituality as being outside of ourselves that we feel like we have to get in touch with it and we have to do something physical in order to, and I can't give you that. I can't give you something physical to do to make you more spiritual. What I can do is just ask you the critical question, do you know yourself? Again, there's that question, who am I? What am I? See, many of us, we have been so fixated on who we are, not considering what we are. Who you are is transitory. That's the name that you have right now, which changes over time. My name is Lenon Honor, but who I was as Lenon Honor, let's say a year ago, was totally different than who I am today. It's transitory. At a certain point, this body will discontinue itself. That's who I am. That's not what I am. What I am is infinite. It is spirituality in an essence. And it's not subject to time. It's not subject to the concept of quote-unquote death. You see, it's an issue of identity. So I can't tell you that you need to do something to get in touch with your spiritual self. What I can say is know thyself in the first place. See, that's what it really comes down to. It's an issue of identity. And if you can begin to restructure your relation to the cosmos, you will ultimately find, as I have found, that spirituality is what you are, and therefore there's no need to get in touch with it. It is only a matter of identifying it as being part of you in the first place.